Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I go to the same coffee shop every morning. It's part of my routine. Wake up at 6:30, shower, get dressed, walk 2 blocks to the corner shop, get my coffee, head to the office. The place is small, maybe fits 10 people comfortably. There's always a line in the morning, usually 5 or 6 people deep. Everyone's half asleep, scrolling on their phones, waiting their turn. It's quiet, peaceful even. Nobody talks much before they've had their caffeine. I work in accounting. I need to be at my desk by 8, which means I need that coffee by 7:15. At the latest, it's non-negotiable. The shop opened about 4 years ago. I started going there because it's convenient, but I kept going because the coffee's actually good, and the staff remembers what I order. They see me walk in and start making my usual without me having to say anything. That kind of thing matters when you're barely functional before caffeine. Everything was fine until about 2 months ago. That's when this guy started showing up. I noticed him the first time because he walked in, saw the line, and his whole face changed. Like he'd just realized he left the stove on at home or something. He stood there for a second looking at all of us waiting, and then he did something that made my eye twitch. He walked straight up to the counter. The barista was helping someone, and this guy just stood there at the side of the register. When she finished and turned to grab the next person's order, he jumped in. He asked her what size their medium was. The barista told him it was 16 ounces. He said that was cool, and then since he was already standing there anyway, he asked if he could just order a medium black coffee. She looked past him at the line. We all looked at each other. But what are you supposed to do? 'Cause a scene over coffee. She made his drink. He paid. He left. I figured it was a one-time thing. Maybe he was late for something important. Whatever. But then he did it again 3 days later. Same routine. Walked in, saw the line, went straight to the counter with his hand already half raised, like he had some urgent question. He asked if they had any dairy-free options. The barista listed off oat milk, almond milk, and soy milk. He said that was perfect and ordered a large coffee with oat milk. I watched him do this 4 separate times over 2 weeks. 4 times. And every single time nobody said anything, including me. Look, I get it. Confrontation before coffee isn't worth it. Everyone's tired. Everyone just wants their drink and to get on with their day. Making a big deal out of some guy cutting in line feels like more trouble than it's worth. But it started eating at me. I'd be standing there phone in hand, watching him do his little performance, and I'd feel this irritation building in my chest. It's the principle of the thing. We're all waiting. We all have places to be. What makes him so special? On the 5th time I saw him walk in, something in me snapped. He came through the door, looked at the line. I saw his face do that same fake realization expression. He started moving toward the counter. I stepped out of line and beat him to it. I apologized and said I had a quick question. The barista looked up. The guy stopped mid-step. I asked her what the difference was between a latte and a cappuccino because I always forgot. She explained that a latte had more steamed milk and a cappuccino had more foam. I said right and then asked which one was stronger. She told me they both had the same amount of espresso and it was just the milk ratio that was different. I said that was interesting and asked if they had oat milk. She said yes. I asked about almond milk. She said they had that too. I asked about soy milk. She confirmed they had it. I asked which one frothed better. She paused. I could see her trying to figure out if I was serious. She said oat milk frothed the best out of those 3. I said that was good to know and asked if she could walk me through their pastry selection. She gestured to the case, started listing items. Croissants, muffins, scones, danishes. I nodded along like I was taking mental notes. I told her those all sounded great, but I needed to get back in line and think about it. I walked back to my spot. The guy was still standing there near the counter, looking confused. The barista called for the next person in line. He had to move aside. I didn't even feel bad about it. The next morning he showed up again. Same pattern. Saw the line, started heading to the counter. I beat him to it again. I asked if they had any seasonal drinks right now. She said they had a pumpkin spice latte. I asked what was in it. She listed espresso, steamed milk, pumpkin spice syrup, and whipped cream. I asked if I could get that without the whipped cream. She said sure. I asked what if I wanted extra whipped cream instead. She said they could do that. I asked how much extra we were talking. She was starting to catch on. I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. She told me however much I wanted. I said that was tempting, but I needed to think about it. I went back to the line. The guy was standing off to the side looking annoyed. I did this every single day for a week straight. I asked about their brewing methods. I asked if they could explain the roasting process. I asked about the origins of their coffee beans. I asked which syrups were sugar-free. I asked about their tea selection, even though I don't drink tea. And every single time I'd finish my questions, say I needed to think about it, and go back in line. The guy stopped trying to cut after day 6. On day 7, he walked in, saw the line, and just got in it like a normal human being. Didn't even look at the counter. Just pulled out his phone and waited his turn. I ordered my usual that day without asking a single question. It's been about a month since then. He still comes in most mornings. He still waits in line. I haven't seen him try his little question routine even once. I grew up with just my mom. My dad left when I was 4 and she raised me on her own while building a successful career in real estate. Money was never really an issue for us, but what mattered most was how hard she worked to make sure I had everything I needed. She put me through college, helped with my first apartment, and was there for every milestone. When I met my wife 3 years ago, my mom seemed genuinely happy for me. She welcomed her into the family without hesitation. About 4 years ago, my mom started dating Rick. He owned some kind of investment firm and had plenty of money himself. They seemed good together, though Rick always struck me as a bit reserved. He was polite enough when we saw him at family dinners, but he never really made an effort to connect. He'd sit close to my mom at gatherings, always touching her arm or holding her hand, like he needed constant reassurance she was still there. I figured he was just shy or maybe not great with people. My wife thought he was fine, if a little boring. We got married this past June. It was a small ceremony with close family and friends, and my mom cried happy tears the whole time. Rick was there too, standing quietly in the background as usual. Everything felt perfect. My wife and I had just bought our first house together, and we were excited about hosting our first Thanksgiving as a married couple in our new home. We've been planning it for weeks, sending out invitations, organizing the menu, making sure everyone knew they were welcome. Then summer happened. My wife was driving home from work one afternoon when my mom called her. They were chatting about Thanksgiving plans while my wife had her on CarPlay through the car speakers. At some point, my mom must have thought she ended the call, but she didn't. The line stayed connected. My wife heard my mom talking to Rick in the background. Rick asked my mom if I made a lot of money. My mom wanted to know why he was asking. Rick said he just thought my career usually paid pretty well. There was a pause, and then Rick admitted he was a dick for saying it, but he didn't think my wife was pretty. He said he'd think I could afford better. My wife told me she felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. She pulled over and just sat there frozen listening as my mom immediately tore into Rick. My mom told him that was disgusting and that he should never talk about my wife like that. Rick started to say something, but my mom cut him off. She said she didn't want to hear it, that my wife was her daughter-in-law and he needed to show her respect, but the damage was done. My wife sat in her car for 20 minutes before she could even drive again. She hung up and called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. When she finally got the words out, I felt rage like I've never felt before. I called my mom immediately. I asked her if Rick had just said my wife wasn't pretty and that I could afford better. My mom went silent. Then she asked in a horrified voice if we were still on the line. I told her no, but my wife was, and she heard everything. My mom started apologizing over and over. She sounded horrified, kept saying she would never want to hurt us, that she told Rick off immediately, that she was so embarrassed. I believed her. I really did. But it didn't change what Rick said. It didn't change how my wife felt. Rick called me later that day to apologize. He said he was sorry, that he spoke without thinking, that he never meant for anyone to hear it. I told him I didn't care what he meant. I told him he disrespected my wife, and I wanted nothing to do with him. He tried to explain that he was just making an observation, that he didn't understand why everyone was so upset. I hung up on him. Months passed. My wife tried to move on, but I could see how it affected her. She'd look in the mirror longer than usual. She'd ask me if I thought she was pretty, something she never did before. She stopped wearing certain outfits she used to love. It broke my heart. I watched the woman I loved question herself because of what some jackass said about her. I told my mom that Rick wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving. I said she was absolutely invited, that we wanted her there, but Rick couldn't come. My mom pushed back. She said we were being unfair, that Rick gave a genuine apology, that he never intended for anyone to hear what he said. She even suggested we probably had private conversations we wouldn't want people to hear either. I told her that wasn't the point. The point was, he said something cruel about my wife, and my wife didn't want to see him. I asked her how she'd feel if my wife's family said something like that about me. She went quiet for a moment, then said it was different. I asked her how. She couldn't answer. I told her I hoped she'd still come, but Rick was not invited. She said she needed to think about it. A few days later, she called again. She asked if we could all sit down and talk it out like adults. I told her there was nothing to talk about. Rick insulted my wife. My wife didn't want him at our home. That was it. My mom got frustrated and said I was putting her in an impossible position. I told her she was putting herself in that position by defending him. Yesterday, my mom called to say she wasn't coming. She said she was spending Thanksgiving with Rick instead. She said she couldn't abandon him when he'd apologized and tried to make things right. I asked her if she realized what she was choosing. She said I was the one making her choose. Then the rest of the family got involved. My aunt called me this morning, furious. She said I was being a selfish brat, that my mom had put me first my entire life, and now I was punishing her for something Rick said. She said I should be grateful for everything my mom had done for me. She said my wife should have thicker skin. I told her my wife had done nothing wrong and didn't deserve to be insulted. My aunt said everyone says stupid things sometimes and we need to learn to forgive. I told her forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into your home. She said I was being dramatic. My grandma called an hour later and said my wife needed to grow up and accept that not everyone would find her attractive. She said it was just honesty and people were too sensitive these days. I told my grandma that if she thought that was acceptable, she didn't need to come either. She told me I was being disrespectful and that I'd regret this. She hung up on me. My uncle sent me a text saying I was tearing the family apart over nothing. He said Rick was a good guy who made one mistake. I didn't respond. Now it's Thanksgiving, and my mom is with Rick. Half the family isn't speaking to me. My wife and I are sitting in our new house with a turkey we made together, and honestly, I don't regret my decision. My mom chose Rick over us. My aunt and grandma chose to defend a man who insulted my wife instead of supporting her. My uncle chose to minimize what happened. My wife looked at me across the table this morning and told me she was proud of me for what I did. She said she knew it was hard to go against my family. She said she loved me for choosing her. That's all I needed to hear. The people who actually matter will be here. The ones who chose to side with cruelty can stay wherever they are. My name's not important, but what you need to know is that I'm 15 and my brother just turned 13. Our mom passed away when I was 9 from cancer. It was the worst thing that ever happened to us. Dad did his best to keep things together, but I could see how much he was struggling. He'd come home from work exhausted, try to make us dinner, help with homework, and sometimes I'd catch him just staring at old photos late at night. About 2 years ago, Dad met her at some work conference. She seemed nice enough at first, laughed at his jokes, was polite to us when they started dating, brought us little gifts here and there. My brother and I were cautiously optimistic. We knew Dad deserved to be happy again. They got married after dating for 8 months and she moved into our house. That's when everything changed. The moment that wedding ring was on her finger, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, everything we did was wrong. We were too loud, too messy, too disrespectful. She wanted us to call her mom, which we refused to do because we already had a mom and she wasn't a replacement. That really set her off. She started making up rules. No TV on weekdays, even though Dad always let us watch after homework. No snacks after school. No friends over. Bedtime at 8:30 even for me, a high schooler. Dad tried to keep the peace. He gently pushed back on some of her more ridiculous demands, but he traveled for work a lot as a sales manager, and when he was gone, she had free reign. My brother and I learned to just keep our heads down and wait for Dad to come home. This week, Dad was at a conference 3 states over. He'd be gone for 5 days. Before he left, he told us to behave and listen to our stepmom, but also slipped us some cash and winked, saying we could order pizza one night as a treat. He knew how she was, even if he didn't want to admit it fully. Day 3 of him being gone, my brother and I were doing our homework in the living room. I was helping him with algebra because he was struggling with it. She came in and demanded to know what we thought we were doing. I told her we were doing homework like we were supposed to. She told me not to get smart with her and said she'd told us both to clean our rooms an hour ago. My brother said she didn't tell us anything and that we've been doing homework since we got home. She asked if he was calling her a liar. I said we were just saying we didn't hear her and that we'd clean our rooms after homework. She said no and that we'd do it now and scrub the bathroom too for talking back to her. I felt my patience snap. We've been dealing with this for 2 years and I was tired. I told her we didn't talk back and that we were doing homework and that Dad said homework comes first. She said our father wasn't here, but she was, and that what she said goes. My brother told her she wasn't our mom and that she couldn't boss us around like this. That's when her face went red. She grabbed her phone and started dialing. She said if we wanted to act like delinquents, then fine, and that we'd see what the police had to say about that. I honestly thought she was bluffing, trying to scare us. We exchanged looks but didn't move. She was actually talking to someone and I heard her say our address. My stomach dropped. She was really cooling the cops on us for not cleaning our rooms immediately. 2 officers showed up about 10 minutes later. We opened the door, confused and honestly a little scared. The first officer asked if there was some trouble here. She pushed past us and said yes, and that we refused to listen to anything she said, and that we were completely out of control, and that she needed them to arrest us. The officers looked at us, then at her, clearly confused. The second officer asked what exactly we did. She said we wouldn't clean our rooms and that we talked back constantly and that we were disrespectful, and she wanted us taken to jail and put in handcuffs and taken away. The first officer told her they couldn't arrest children for not cleaning their rooms because that wasn't a crime. She said we were being insubordinate and that she was our parent and we needed to learn respect. The second officer asked where our parents were. She said she was our parent and that our father was traveling for work. I said she was our stepmom and that our dad was at a conference in Ohio. The first officer said we seemed fine to him and that we were doing homework and there was no crime here. The second officer said they were going to head out now and that maybe everyone just needed to cool down. That's when she completely lost it. She screamed that they were useless and all of them, and that she called for help and they did nothing, and that this was why nobody respected cops anymore, and that they were pathetic and worthless. She kept screaming when they walked toward the door. Then she stormed into the kitchen. I heard something crash and suddenly she was running back with this big glass jar that usually held cookies. She hurled it straight at the officers. It missed but exploded on the floor right in front of them. Glass shattered everywhere. Everything happened so fast. Both officers had their guns out, pointed at her. The first officer yelled at her to get down on the ground right now. Her face went white. She froze. The second officer yelled at her to get on the ground and put her hands where they could see them. She dropped to her knees and the first officer moved in fast, pulling out handcuffs. Within seconds, she was cuffed and being pulled to her feet. She was crying now, suddenly apologetic. She said she was sorry and didn't mean it, and that she was just upset and begged them to please let her go. The second officer said she just assaulted police officers and that she was under arrest. They read her rights while my brother and I stood there in complete shock. Before they took her out, the first officer turned to us. He asked if there was someone they could call for us and if we had another relative. I said our grandma and that she was our dad's mom and that she lived about 20 minutes away. They called her and she showed up so fast she must have broken every speed limit. She hugged us both tight while the officers explained everything. They also called Dad and filled him in. I could hear him freaking out over the phone saying he'd catch the first flight home. Grandma stayed with us that night. The next day, Dad came home looking exhausted and furious. He immediately got a lawyer. Turns out throwing objects at police officers is serious. She's being charged with assault on an officer and reckless endangerment. Dad filed for divorce the following week, said he couldn't believe he'd been so blind to how bad things had gotten. He apologized to us over and over. She's now looking at possible jail time and definitely probation. The divorce is moving forward fast, since Dad has documentation of everything, including the police report. My brother and I are just glad she's gone. Dad promised no more marriages without serious time and making sure we're all on the same page. I moved into this house 4 years ago right after finishing grad school and landing my first real job. It had a fenced front yard that was perfect for my 2 dogs. They're both rescues I adopted during my last year of university. One's a mixed breed who looks like someone combined every dog breed into one goofy package, and the other is a senior beagle who moves at exactly one speed, slow. Over the years, I've put in serious work turning that yard into our little sanctuary. I planted dog-safe herbs, put in some decorative pots with plants my dogs could even nibble on if they wanted, and made it a space where they could relax while I worked on my laptop from the porch. My routine was simple: morning walk, then we'd spend time in the yard. The dogs would sleep in the sun or play with their toys while I handled work emails and video calls. Evening walk, then back to the yard for a bit before dinner. Weekends meant hiking trips to the trails about an hour away. It worked perfectly, and we never bothered anyone. About a year ago, new neighbors moved in next door. Their yard was bigger than mine, also fenced. We exchanged pleasantries when they first arrived, the usual small talk about the neighborhood and trash pickup schedules. They seemed normal enough. I didn't think much about them after that initial meeting. 6 months ago, they got a cat. I noticed it because the thing started showing up in my yard right away. It would climb over the fence and dig around in my pots, scattering soil everywhere and breaking off plant stems. My dogs would notice it, walk over to investigate, and the cat would bolt back to its own yard. I trained my dogs not to chase animals, so they'd just watch it go. Maybe follow it to the fence line at most, then lose interest. The cat kept coming back though, multiple times a day. I'd find evidence of it digging in different pots, leaving little presents in the soil, crushing plants by lying on them. I never did anything about it. I figured the cat would get bored eventually, or my dog's presence would discourage it. I certainly never let my dogs out to chase it or scare it. They just existed in their own yard, doing what they'd been doing for 4 years. This morning I got back from our walk around 7. There was a note stuck to my front door. I pulled it off and read it, while my dogs waited patiently, still clipped to their leashes. The note demanded that I keep my dogs inside because their cat didn't like them and enjoyed being in my yard. Not asked, demanded. I stood there for a minute reading it twice to make sure I understood right. Then I walked my dogs inside, got them settled with fresh water, and headed next door. My neighbor answered after the third knock. She was maybe in her mid-30s, wearing yoga pants and holding a coffee mug. I told her I got her note. She asked if that meant I'd keep my dogs inside then, sounding like it was already settled. I said no, explaining that my dogs were in their own yard and weren't attacking or chasing her cat. She complained that my dog scared her cat and that he didn't want to go in their yard anymore because he was traumatized. I pointed out that the cat was coming into my yard and my dogs were just existing in their space. She argued that I took my dogs on walks twice a day, that she'd seen me do it, and that I took them hiking on weekends too. According to her, they didn't need to be outside otherwise. I felt my jaw drop slightly. She'd been watching my schedule. I told her my dogs had been using that yard for 4 years, long before she moved here and long before she got a cat. She insisted her cat was mostly outdoors and claimed it was cruel of me to deprive him from going in my yard, especially since he liked lying down in some of my plants. I suggested she plant those same plants in her own yard, reminding her she had more space than I did. She said their yard wasn't set up for that yet. I told her that sounded like her problem, not mine. I explained that my dogs stayed in my yard, and if her cat chose to come over and then got spooked, that was on the cat and on her for letting it roam. She called me unreasonable and said my dogs were vicious. I pointed out they were a senior beagle and a mutt who was scared of butterflies. I said they'd never touched her cat. She threatened that the next time her cat ran from my yard back to theirs because my dogs terrorized it, she was calling animal control. I asked her what exactly she'd be calling them for, since my dogs were just being in their own yard. She slammed the door in my face hard enough that I heard something rattle inside their house. I walked back home, my mind spinning. Calling animal control because their outdoor cat voluntarily entered my yard and then left? On what grounds? My dogs weren't aggressive, weren't escaping, weren't violating any ordinances. They were just existing in their own fenced space. I spent the rest of the day researching local pet laws and reaching out to a lawyer friend from college. Turns out I'm right. My dogs are contained, not aggressive, and I have no legal obligation to keep them inside my own home because someone else's outdoor cat wanders over. My friend suggested I document everything: dates, times, incidents, the note, our conversation. I also ordered security cameras for my porch and yard. If she wanted to play games, I'd have evidence of exactly what my dogs were and weren't doing. And if that cat kept trespassing and causing property damage to my plants, well, I'd have documentation of that too. The entitlement was baffling. They chose to get a cat. They chose to let it roam outdoors. The cat chose to enter my yard. And somehow I was supposed to change my life and keep my dogs locked inside their own home because of their choices. I sat on my porch that evening while my dogs dozed nearby. The cat appeared on the fence, saw us, and jumped back down on their side right away. Tomorrow I'd install those cameras, and if she called animal control, they'd find two well-cared-for dogs living peacefully in their own yard while someone else's pet trespassed repeatedly. Let her try. My husband has wanted to own a hot dog cart since before we got married. He used to talk about it constantly. How he'd serve classic dogs with all the toppings, how he'd be part of community events, how it would be ours. Most people thought it was just talk, but I knew he was serious, so we saved. For years, we put money aside from our regular jobs, cutting back on everything we could. No fancy vacations, no eating out much, no impulse purchases. Every dollar we could spare went into the hot dog cart fund. After what felt like forever, we had enough to buy the cart he wanted. Not just any cart, but a proper old-school vendor cart that looked like something out of the 1950s. It was beautiful, chrome and red, with a striped umbrella on top, the kind of cart that makes people smile when they see it. The thing is, we can't just set up anywhere we want. County and state laws are really strict about food vendors operating on public streets. We need permits, and those permits are only for specific events. So our business runs on invitations. We get hired for city events, local business gatherings, festivals, that sort of thing. It's not steady work, but it's honest work, and my husband loves every minute of it. This event was our last one for the year. A trunk or treat held at the minor league baseball stadium. Huge event, completely free for families to attend. Over 2,000 people show up every year. Kids in costumes everywhere, decorated car trunks, games, and ES food vendors scattered around to keep everyone fed. We always love events with kids. They get so excited about hot dogs, and their parents usually get a kick out of seeing an old-fashioned hot dog cart run by a husband and wife team. People take pictures with us sometimes. It makes my husband so proud. That night was going great. The weather was perfect, not too cold. Costumes were incredible. We saw superheroes, princesses, dinosaurs, you name it. Our hot dogs were selling well. We were in the middle of helping a customer when these two boys showed up. They looked about 12 years old, maybe a little younger. No costumes, no parents that I could see. They just walked right up and interrupted us while we were taking someone's order. The first boy asked if they could have a free hot dog. I finished with our customer first, then turned to them and told them sorry, but we didn't have free hot dogs tonight. The second boy pushed, asking us to come on and give them just one each. I repeated that we were selling hot dogs, not giving them away. But they didn't leave. They just stood there, staring at us. The first boy pleaded with us, saying they really wanted hot dogs. My husband stepped in and asked if they had tried asking the burger truck for free food. The second boy admitted they had, but got turned down. My husband asked about the taco trailer. They said no to that too. He asked about the pizza truck. Nope. The barbecue stand. Also nope. These kids had gone to every single food vendor at this event begging for free food and been turned down by everyone. And yet they kept going. I asked them why they thought we would say yes when everyone else had said no. The second boy just shrugged and said we might. They kept at it, begging, pleading, giving us sad eyes. We had other customers waiting, but these boys would not leave. They stood right there at our cart, going on and on about how hungry they were, how they really wanted hot dogs, how it wouldn't hurt us to just give them one. 5 minutes went by. 5 full minutes of them badgering us while we tried to serve other people. My husband had enough. He told them to look around and see that we were the smallest business there. He pointed out that the other vendors had trucks and trailers while we only had a cart. Just a cart. He explained that we couldn't afford to give away free food because every hot dog costs us money. That seemed to get through to them. At least temporarily, they walked away. 20 minutes later, they were back. The first boy asked if they could have those free hot dogs now. I almost laughed and reminded them we had already said no. The second boy insisted they were really hungry. My husband made them an offer. He told them that if they came back 10 minutes before we closed at 8 o'clock and we had hot dogs left over, they could have them. He explained we'd rather give away extra inventory than throw it out. Their faces lit up. The first boy confirmed the time, asking if he meant 7:50. My husband said yes, 7:50, not before. The second boy agreed excitedly and they ran off. Actually happy for once. I thought we'd found a solution that worked for everyone. If we had extras, great. If not, well, we tried. 7:30 rolled around. The event was still going strong, people everywhere. And here came those two boys again. The first boy announced they were leaving now and wanted their hot dogs. I reminded them we had said 7:50 and it was only 7:30. The second boy protested that they were leaving. My husband told them then they wouldn't get hot dogs because we had said 7:50. The first boy complained that it wasn't fair. I pointed out that we were still selling and these weren't free yet. The second boy accused us of breaking our promise. My husband corrected him, explaining that we had promised if they came back at 7:50 and we had extras, but it wasn't 7:50 and we didn't have extras. They started up again with the begging. They went on about how they came all the way back, how we said they could have hot dogs, pleading over and over. We kept saying no. We had customers who were actually paying. These boys were blocking our cart, making a scene. After a few more minutes of this, they gave up and left for good. I stood there stunned and asked my husband what just happened. He said he had no idea. I wondered out loud where their parents were. He said that was a good question. I kept looking around for adults who might be with those boys, thinking I'd have a word with them about teaching their kids that you can't just demand free stuff from small businesses. But I never saw anyone claim them. Maybe their parents didn't care. Maybe that's why the boys acted that way in the first place. This wasn't the first time kids had asked us for free hot dogs. Sometimes little ones ask, and we smile and explain that we're selling them. They usually understand and move on. But this was the first time kids had harassed us like that, refused to take no for an answer, and kept coming back over and over. The entitlement was unbelievable. What makes someone think they deserve free food just because they asked for it? Especially after being told no by multiple vendors? We're not a charity. We're a small business trying to make ends meet. Every hot dog we give away is money out of our pockets. We're the smallest vendor there with just a cart while everyone else has trucks and trailers with more resources and bigger profit margins. We packed up at 8, tired but relieved the event was over. It had been a good night overall, despite those boys. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.